Scotty with Treasury Talent, as always, joined by Simon Lynch, our Managing Director. Simon, how are things in Australia today?
Oh, it's great here, mate. I guess I was waiting for you to say it, but the freshly shorn me, you may not recognise, had a bit of a mishap at the barbers yesterday, and I had a foreign barber who didn't really understand what I said when I wanted to shave. So here you go. This is the first and only time you'll ever see me fully shaven.
Yeah, you're lucky that you get out of there alive with your eyebrows. So we're happy to have you here. And Scotty, as always, is monitoring the conversation and getting that set up. So he's on mute. He can't even respond to what we have going on right now. But as always, Treasury community, what we're going to be talking about today is just the importance, if you're hiring, the importance of an employee value proposition, or what you might hear as an EVP. And really the importance of selling the opportunity if you are interviewing for a role. This is part of a larger series that we're developing in the background. More to come on that very soon. But please make sure that you're chipping in with any kind of likes, comments, questions, anything like that. We have a general feel for how this conversation is going to go. But as always, we love interacting with you guys. So anything you have for us related to this topic, please feel free to jump in. We'll do our best to answer that. I think between the three of us, we can certainly get that ironed out. So with that, Simon, I'm going to kick it off with you. What are the problem areas if you don't understand your employer or employee value proposition, or if you're not selling the role? What do you risk here?
Look, I think that the biggest issue and pain point for people is I think a lot of our clients and people who are hiring go into it thinking, okay, I'm going to get a selection of people and then I'm going to work out which person I want. And I think that the key there is just understanding that an interview process is a two-way street, and you really need to be selling your organization, the role, and even yourself, because they're the three things that the candidate is coming in to understand. And like, they need to understand a little bit about your company and why you want to work there. They really want to know about the job, because that's obviously what's got them in the door, and you need to sell that to make sure that relative to other roles, it's attractive. But also don't underestimate the fact that they're also evaluating you as their boss. Do I want to work with this person? So I think that the overarching point here is an interview process is two-way. A good candidate is going to have multiple offers. Every good candidate that we chat to always has other things on the go. It's not a question of saying, this is an offer I'm going to put to you, because the chances are they're going to be getting other things at the same time. And just being aware of that and making sure that you understand how you're going to sell your business, or EVP as you call it. That to me is a fundamental, because it's a different way of going in, right? You're thinking about selling as opposed to just thinking about, what do I want out of this candidate?
Yeah, and you actually touched on a really good point there. Scotty, you had put out something related, I'd say within the last couple of weeks over LinkedIn, where I know when I was recruiting throughout the GFC, there was this antiquated mentality where, hey, if someone wants a job, it's going to be on our terms. And it's just, we can treat people however, because at the end of the day, they need a job, we have a job. But I think the three of us definitely assume if you're talking to us that you're talking to others too. That's perfectly fine. Give yourself as many options as you can to find that job. I think you'll find that we'll be the most effective in the long run. But Scotty, the post that you had put out was more along the lines of, there are a lot of assumptions made that if someone applies to the role and they decide that they're going to interview with you, that they're pretty much in the bag and nothing else needs to be done outside of just showing up at that point. And Simon, you just touched on that. So Scotty, is there anything else you want to add? Because I really like that post.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think it's the key word there is assumptions, right? And the post that I put out is essentially, you cannot assume just because somebody applied to the job, that means that they would accept an offer if it's given. And that, to your point about an antiquated mindset, that's what, a lot of companies, they don't necessarily say that. Certainly they don't say that to us, but their actions tell us that. Showing up to an interview unprepared as a hiring manager, showing up unprepared or late, not asking the difficult questions that many people just don't want to know the answer to. So, Joe, you mentioned it, here at Treasury Talent, whenever we're speaking to a candidate, we could go ahead and assume that they're speaking to others and they're interviewing elsewhere, We actually ask that question. We ask a number of questions that many people don't ask. We make sure that a candidate knows that, yeah, this is remote today, but once we can go back to the office, you're going to have to go back to the office. This is what the commute looks like. Are you okay with that? And there's just a number of things that are assumptions that are made that will trip you up and ultimately can lead to somebody surprising you at the end of the process when they decline an offer, because you've never once asked them what's most important to them in the job. How do we align with that? And I think Simon said it, selling. Sometimes it's a dirty word outside of the sales space, but it's also one of the critical skills, especially for a hiring manager. When you want to get top talent, you have to kind of toe the line between vetting someone, of course, but also selling them on why they should want to work for you.
No, absolutely. And it is the start of a relationship, regardless, whether or not that relationship bears fruit and you wind up working together. That's the optimal situation. But at the same time, even if it's someone that you don't plan to hire, they're not right for you at that time, they're going to go off, they're going to get other skills, they're going to develop. You may want to keep in touch with them and make sure that they are provided with a good experience so that they want to work with you if ever given the opportunity again as well. I think that's a different conversation for a different day. But the reason why I bring up the GFC and recruiting throughout that is just because same kind of situation that we're talking about right now. It's easy. It's when you get the amount of applications or people, you have a large number of people who are looking for jobs right now. It's easy to kind of get comfortable as a hiring manager saying, well, I have 300 applications for this. Someone out of this is going to take this job. I don't have to sell this job. This job is going to sell itself. I'm not saying that it's laziness. I'm not saying that it's complacency or anything like that, but it's easy to have that false sense of security. And then all of a sudden, all these other people are finding jobs because you're not the only person hiring, believe it or not. And you're left holding the bag with an empty seat, and you're costing your company money because that seat's empty.
Joe, on that point, I think that the other really important point to make for hiring managers to understand is we hear this all the time, and the reality of what people want is they want someone who's amazing. They like realistically, they're talking top 1%, top 2% of the population, of the Treasury population, is the people that they want, and they get lulled into a false sense of security that 300 applications means there's 300 good people. There isn't. What you're talking about, if you're going to be really specific and want the best of the best, those people generally are probably not even applying to a job ad because they're used to being tapped on the shoulder. But more importantly, that volume, you're still wanting a really good candidate, and a really good candidate has to be sold to. They're not going to take the job unless they like the company and what the company's doing. They're not going to take it unless they like the job. And most importantly, they're definitely not going to take it if they don't like you as a manager. And I think that's the other thing that you just touched on there, Joe, is providing a good candidate experience throughout a recruitment process is fundamental. Treasury is a niche area. It's very specialized. It's small. If you don't provide a good process all the way through, when you want that person in 2 years' time, they'll remember that, and they're not going to come back to you, and they definitely won't apply. So, you've also got to be thinking long-term in Treasury, because it's 1 degree of separation, and those processes and you as a manager are being evaluated all the way through that process. The really hot candidate that you want, by not selling to them, chances are they're going to turn you down and probably won't come back for second, third, even get to the point of offer because of the experience that they have in the first interview process.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that you bring up. And to even take it a step further, I know when I was doing the research, the industry research, just on remote interviewing tips and providing a good candidate experience that way, not only will people not re-engage with you, if you show them such a poor experience, about 22% will actually actively work against you. And if you're a direct-to-consumer company, they're working against your brand. Or if they have, depending on their network within the Treasury space, they're probably telling people their experience and telling them not to waste their time applying there or even interviewing because it was such a terrible experience. I'm going to pivot just real quick. Employee value proposition. It's pretty commonplace in everything that we do. We talk about personal branding on the job seeker side. We have the employee value proposition on the interviewer or on the hiring side. Scotty, I don't know if you're prepared to take a question right now, but How would you, I guess, Simon, we'll start off with you. How would you describe the employee value proposition from your point of view?
It's really just how you're perceived as a company by other people externally and people you're trying to bring into your business. So it's really the values and the ideals that are fundamental to your organization and how you're going to sell yourself as such. I'm not a massive believer in the all of the written down and what people say, but it's how you live it is my view of that. How are you selling your company and how are you living those values that you have within your company as part of that sales process when people are coming through the door?
Yeah, it ties into your employer brand overall, and that's another buzzword that's thrown around in HR and recruiting circles a lot. And it may not necessarily make its way to the operational side, and I think that's where a little bit of a disconnect comes in. Is how you're perceived in the external market ultimately depends or determines who is attracted to your roles and who you actually have the opportunity to hire. The employee value proposition for me is just the employee is bringing the skills, they're bringing the work, they're going to produce for you, they're going to be compensated monetarily, but what else are they getting out of it? Why should they choose your company? These are the areas of why someone should choose your company or your opportunity over competitors or anyone else who's hiring for a similar skill set in the industry. That's what's going to be unique to you. And Simon, you touched on a little bit of what makes that up, and we will touch on that again momentarily. But like it's important. And from my standpoint, I mean, I've been doing this for 14 years. It does not get enough attention. Yeah, it's talked about, but when it actually, Simon, to your point earlier, there's a difference between talking and acting, and just the actions they don't match up with the talk that's going on.
Yeah, Joe.
Go, Scotty.
So I was just going to say, we should probably address why it's important.
Yeah.
And I think that the biggest reason, the number one reason, and the reason that's often overlooked, if you're a hiring manager, especially if you've been with your company for a while and you're happy and you are focused and you think that what you have at your organization is amazing, don't forget that, that's your perception is reality, and that's where you're living. But there is a tremendous amount of competition. If you pick your head up for a second and take a look around like we do at the number of jobs that are posted for Treasury, I mean, there's a tremendous demand. So there's competition. And Simon, to your point, not only when you have 300 people apply to a job, are you not getting, the best of the best? You're also getting plenty of people who aren't in Treasury at all, right? They just want to be in Treasury. Or frankly, some of them just want a job. So yeah, it's super important to understand that there's a competitive marketplace in this space. And especially if you're interested in top talent, you absolutely have to, I think we've belabored the point that you absolutely have to sell to those people.
Can I just say as well, like the other thing I think that's really important for people to know is within the junior ranks of Treasury, which is obviously where a lot of roles fall. So anyone who's an analyst, a senior analyst, a manager, even a senior manager, those roles are talent short. Now, the reality that happens in Treasury is everyone falls into Treasury. So the more junior the role, the less people there are within the pipeline. And if you're thinking that putting an ad out at that level to attract people is getting you the right people, then it's probably ill-advised. But the key to that is these guys, like anyone who's good, and all three of us can give you some pretty good examples, but anyone who's good in that space, particularly if they're an analyst level person, like I guarantee they will have 4 or 5 different options. Like they are highly sought after and supply is very thin. And so the more junior the role is, the more you need to sell. And the pickier these guys are. They will move for title. They will move for a small amount of money more. It's really, really important. The more junior, the more you need to be listening to this and acting on it, because it's literally going to come down to if you don't get that person, you won't have someone to fill your job.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pose the question: if I'm sitting in the practitioner seat and I know I need to add to my team, whether it's the rest of this year or first quarter next year, and all of a sudden I'm caught off guard by this employee value proposition thing, where am I going? What am I doing? What should I be looking at to really determine what's unique to my organization? Simon, I'll go with you.
I would say, like, I would hope that you've got some kind of company specific intel on this that you can go to HR and maybe be speaking to. But even if it's just to the point of, you need to be thinking about yourself and your role and how you sell the company and making that sing. Because I actually think that the manager who is going to be the person they report to is probably the key figure for them. So you need to be thinking about yourself and why does someone want to come and work with you, and why does someone want to come and do the job that you're asking them to do. The company thing, is overarching on that. And I think that you probably know how you sell your company, but coming to someone like us and asking how they position it and seeing if they need any advice, we're happy to help. I mean, I think that one of the great examples I can give you is I started my career with KPMG, so I was in the accounting world, and I'm just going to use this as the example because at the end of the day, when I was interviewing PwC, EY, Deloitte, KPMG, I was interviewing with all of them, and I was chatting to them all. They all think that they're really different. They all thought that they were doing something that was mind-blowingly exceptional to the others. The reality is it was just a different coloured banner doing the same stuff. And the person that I went to was the person that I related to the most. The company value proposition to me was all kind of the same. The job was kind of the same, but the manager and the people that I was going to work with were the ones that were really the differentiators. So just thinking about those in your industry and what you're doing, perhaps that would be a good idea. Does that answer your question, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, to your point, employer value proposition ties into employer brand very, very well. It's an integral part of employer brand, and that usually sits with your HR, your recruiting department, maybe even marketing, depending on the organization, how that's set up. So if you don't have an internal recruitment department, make sure you're going to your marketing department to figure out exactly how the company is being marketed externally. Because when you think about all these different surveys and polls and best places to work and all of that, at the end of the day, yeah, they're great awards, but they're really recruiting tools. And that's what you tie into your employer value proposition. And the good companies are figuring out exactly what was hit on to get those awards. And they're in tune with their HR department and their engagement surveys. Why are people working there? I mean, that's, I was working with a client out on the East Coast where they had the highest engagement survey in the company, and that was a point of pride for them. That was something that the Treasury department took very, very seriously, and they guarded very closely. So they knew that if they're adding, they want people who are going to add to that engagement, who want to be challenged, who want to really evolve and push Treasury forward. And that's something that sells itself. I mean, if you can claim engagement survey stats that are top of the company in a very large multinational corporation, if I'm a Treasury professional, it's like, all right, well, what's the secret sauce there? What the heck's going on? I'd be knocking on the door to figure out exactly what they're doing.
Right. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Both of you have touched on some of the less obvious stuff, but just to be completely explicit about the obvious stuff, I mean, there's a lot of practical things that go into this, and it's what you'd expect. It starts with the monetary aspect, right? So often we hear from people who want to pay under market. I mean, you can't do it. I mean, you can, but you're not going to get what you want when you do it, right? So that's got to be number one. Benefits, the total rewards package, all that stuff is also goes into an employee value proposition. And then finally, I think just, outside of what you guys have already touched on, is that knowing it's really difficult to articulate a company culture. In many cases, it's even more difficult to articulate the team culture. It's almost like it's a feeling. So really getting clear up front. And this is a great opportunity as a hiring manager for you to, interview with your team. If you're not already doing stay interviews, just try to understand what your team thinks about the culture. And also, again, great opportunity for you to address maybe areas of opportunity that they have for you at that moment. But understanding all of that. And then Simon, I think you said it, with regards to, at the end of the day, you as a leader, I mean, you can go into a bad company, but if you've already established relationships, if you're networking, if you're building a passive talent pool throughout your career, which everybody should, then, oftentimes you can sell yourself on, hey, I'm here to turn this around. And that goes a really long way. Joe, I've got a question I want to pose to the two of you from the community. So I wanted to say thanks, Ricardo. This is a good question. I'm glad I'm posing it and not answering it right up front. So Ricardo asks, do you feel that somehow employee value proposition must be higher in the small towns or away from main employers areas to attract talent? It's definitely the way it's perceived in Brazil. Do we see the same thing in the US and Australia? Sorry, let's start with Simon.
That's all right. I was going to say, I'll take it then. Look, I absolutely think that no matter what market, in smaller towns for sure, because there's not as much competition out there. Like they're probably choosing between, a small number of employers. And but at the end of the day, bigger is not always better for everyone. So just because you're the big game in town as the biggest employer doesn't necessarily mean you're the best place to go. So, in a way, that's how you would sell yourself as a business that perhaps isn't as big or isn't perceived as being having as many opportunities. If you've got a really good value proposition, if you're, for instance, if you pay particularly well, that is a big factor for many people. So just thinking about, okay, what do you perceive people want and how are we going to position ourselves versus our competition is all about that value proposition. So I would say even more so in a smaller place, but the reality is it's kind of the same because it's just you versus your competition. However many in your competition shouldn't really be a factor.
Yeah, just to add on to that and completely agree with you is, the size of the market doesn't really matter because your competition can change in an instant. You could have a new company that moves into the territory. You can have an up and coming company that all of a sudden blows up. You can even, with this model, I know we've talked a lot about remote work. That may open up a wider candidate pool where all of a sudden you have more competition where you're not just competing in your local market either. So, it's important regardless. Simon, to your point, compensation is always top three when we're talking to people. It's not number one for everyone, but it definitely falls within those top three decision-making criteria for job seekers because nobody wants to work for free. You want to be paid fairly for the work that you're doing. As a practitioner, as a hiring manager, what we're talking about for that employer value or employee value proposition is if you find yourself a notch below or even like maybe you're severely off, maybe you're off by a little bit in terms of competitive compensation, know what levers you can pull to make up for that. Maybe it's additional vacation time. Maybe it's a larger variable component to it where you're negotiating the bonus. Maybe it's a flexible work schedule. You have to get creative if you are a smaller company because you are often confined by a tighter budget than some of these larger corporates. So I know that, it's not necessarily, it's answering the question, but at the same time, it's just a few helpful suggestions for what you might be able to do if or to add to your employee value proposition.
And I think I would just add to that, Ricardo, that here in the US, I can't speak to Australia or Brazil, but there are some markets that have a reputation for what they're all about. Now this is changing a little bit. The internet is in many ways a great equalizer, but if you want to be in technology and you want to join a startup, it's still well known here in the US, the best place to go is going to be the Bay Area. It's still the case. There are other companies that are other cities, other communities that are starting to catch up in some ways, but it's still the Mecca. And it's the same thing. And, if you want to be in entertainment, go to Hollywood. If you want to be in finance, go to New York City. I mean, there's areas that are better known for things. So I think it's important, if you are a large company, depending on the type of talent you're attracting, opening up satellite offices, that not everybody has that luxury, but oftentimes, it's wherever the company starts is a big factor, and it's usually pretty deliberate. So I think people, here in the States tend to relocate and kind of end up where their interests lie, for what it's worth. I think we might have got another question here, gents. Okay. Oh yeah, the hottest topic out there right now. So Juan Carlos, appreciate the question here. I'm going to pose this one to Joe first. So I've seen a few remote treasury manager roles do you feel that this shift to remote work in Treasury would be slow or something that we could see frequently in 2021?
Yeah, the question that we get most frequently, especially given the pandemic. So thanks for the question. The consensus that I keep coming back to is that this is going to be a hybrid model. You're gonna have the companies who can make it work remotely. The overwhelming majority of conversations that I have is whether it's an individual contributor or leadership, is that there's got to be some kind of mix in the office. Not everyone's cut out to work from home all the time. Not everyone's productive. Not everyone has the ability to work from home productively for an extended period of time. Plus, you miss out on the personal interaction. Relationships are always better formed face to face. Treasury being very relationship focused. Even remote roles may include some travel into a satellite office at some given time. What I'm seeing most frequently is people are accepting positions. They're able to work remotely for the time being. They're going to have to eventually work out or relocate to the market where the job should be posted. So as you do see these remote opportunities, make sure as you're interviewing for them that you are asking that question. Hey, what does this look like when the offices start to open back up, or when your office, like, am I going to be expected to relocate? Is there travel? Don't just take it at face value for a remote job, because at the same time, companies are trying to attract the best of the best. They're not always forthright with the actual plan for the role, and that's where you really have to do your due diligence on the back end. So I know it was kind of a long and winding answer there, but it's not exactly just a cut and dry, is this going to happen, yes or no, because there are way too many variables to paint with a broad brush there.
The other thing I just wanted to add to that for the listeners is, as much as the media is trying to push at the moment that remote work is the way forward, the reality is companies aren't ready for that yet. They don't have policies in place for it. There's a few big tech companies and big names that have put it out there that they're going to be remote moving forward. They are the minority. So to put it into perspective, we would probably, let's say for argument's sake, we recruit 100 roles in a year. Less than 5% of those at the moment would be roles that are considered remote. So 95% of the jobs that we have on currently are still work in an office, or it might be working remote for now because everyone's at home, but the ongoing role is going to be work from an office. So I just really want to put it out there that as much as you all think that that's coming, and I hope that it does, I'm behind it, that the CFOs and the treasurers that we're dealing with are still risk averse. They're still not for their jobs saying that it is going to be possible. And I want to hope that it becomes a little bit better for you all, but it's not a quick fix at the moment.
Yeah, I will add to that one, Carlos, that we're actually a distributed workforce here at Treasury Talent. You guys, I think by now, if you've been on these lives before, you know that. And we have been. We were this way before the pandemic. So we've asked this question, way before the pandemic, and the answer that we get most often from hiring managers was, no, there's no opportunity for remote. There's no way you can do this job remotely. Now, obviously, many of them have recognized that they had to make it happen, but we're talking about a cultural norm that needs to shift, and those cultural norms move far slower. So just to bring it back to the topic at hand, from an employee value proposition standpoint, I do think it's a huge opportunity. And I honestly think that it's going to help companies sell jobs where maybe they can't pay as much as market, and they recognize that. This is going to create another level or layer to the employee value proposition. However, as a candidate, what you have to think about now is that your competition just opened to the entire, at least the entire country, if not the entire world. So that'd be my only other thing to add there around remote. And again, it looks like we may have gotten another, just a thank you from Juan Carlos. So you're welcome. And gentlemen, I think, is there anything that we've missed today? I'm just going to give a call out real quick to anybody else who wants to throw a question our way, because we're about to wrap up here. Joe?
Yeah, just to finish off the thought, I thought of this while you were speaking, but Simon mentioned the large tech companies, and there are companies that are hiring remotely right now. That's going to provide a short-term competitive advantage. And what you'll find is that those companies will be able to hire who they want for those people who want to work remotely. Other people are going to catch on. And so it'll be a short-term employee value proposition, the flexible work environment and everything that goes on with it, if it adapts the way that we think it will. But everybody else is eventually going to catch up and catch on because they're going to miss out on the people that they want to hire. And that's where the necessity breeds creativity, right? You need to hire someone, you got to get creative, and you got to keep up with the Joneses in that regard. That's a fairly easy win if you can figure out the remote model. So that's why it's important to understand what's unique to your organization that can't be copied by any other organization. And that's, maybe it is comp, maybe it is benefits, maybe it's just managerial style, and you're big on growth and mentorship and personal development and that type of stuff. But it's all the more reason. Anything that's happening with success in the market does tend to not cannibalize itself, but it's mirrored throughout. So that's why, if you take nothing else away from this, understand your employee value proposition and really, really, really have that down by the time you get into an interview, and listen to what the person is telling, listen to what the person you're interviewing is telling you, what's important to them, what questions are they asking there, because it allows you to tailor your sales pitch for your opportunity and for your organization based on what you know about your employer or employee value proposition. Showstopper, that's what we got. So, Scotty, I think if we're all set here, Simon, do you have anything else you want to add? Silence is golden, Scotty.
Yeah, no, it looks like we don't have any additional questions. So, yeah, to your point, Joe, I love that. I think leaving the audience with the fact that when you talk about employee value propositions, it's not a one size fits all. So that's a really good point. I don't think we brought up earlier in the conversation, to understand what's important to the person you're interviewing. And then, obviously you're not going to, you can't create things if it doesn't exist, but make sure that you highlight the areas that are important to that top talent that you're trying to attract. I think that's a great place to end here on. Cool.
Well, as always, Treasury community, we appreciate the attendance and the attention and the questions. It's always great to interact with you all. We'll be here again next Wednesday, right before Thanksgiving in the U.S. And of course, Scotty and I have Mondays, Ask a Treasury Recruiter. If you have anything specifically related to your job search, we'll be here at 12 noon, 9 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Pacific on Monday. So with that, we'll cut you loose for today. Have a good one. Thanks.